So my name's Diane Seider. For those of you that have not met me in person, I'm the GP Practice Director here at Turnkey. I'm going on 13 years here, so I've been here for quite a while. And I'm going to talk about some GP tips and tricks today. So the agenda, the items I'm going to cover, we're going to look at Management Reporter, the web viewer versus what I call the classic viewer. We're going to look at assigning function keys to GP shortcuts. We will also look at the Doc Date Verify tool. It's part of the professional services tools. We'll look at that. We will walk through quickly setting up and adding new users to GP, some ways to cut down on the time setting up security and whatnot. We'll look at easy date entry in GP and any GP window, and then we'll close out with creating a payable check from customer credit balances. You can see it. Yeah, it's not showing up on the screen. Hold on 1 second, please. Mm. Okay, better. Teamwork. All right, perfect. So, so you guys can see me. So the first thing I want to talk about, like I said, is the Management Reporter web viewer versus the classic viewer. So anytime we do an upgrade or you guys move servers or Management Reporter is installed on a new terminal server or a new workstation, it seems like by default, when you go to run your Management Reporter reports, they open up in the web viewer format and we get a lot of calls. What happened to my reports? Why did this change? So I want to make sure everybody is aware of the differences and where you can go in Management Reporter to change that view. So I'm going to go to Tools and Options, and it's under Tools and Options, there is this Use Management Reporter Report Viewer as the default. You notice right now it's not checked. So by default, when Management Reporter is installed, that box is not checked. So when I run the report, I'll show you what this looks like. So this is the web viewer, the Management Reporter web viewer. You notice you have buttons down here, so you can download this report to Excel from the web viewer. You can print it. You could do a few things, but a lot of people don't like this view. So to change it, again, you go to Tools and Options, and you check the box, use the the MR report viewer as the default viewer. And now when you generate, you get what I call the classic view. Hurry up, there's beer to drink. Come on. And so this is the report viewer view. And so you can toggle back and forth. Like I said, a lot of people tend to prefer this view over the web, but we do get a lot of calls on that, so we thought we'd cover it. Any questions on that before I move on? All right. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is shortcuts in GP and how I can set up a function key for the shortcut so that all I have to do is press the button and the window or whatever will open. So right now I have one shortcut. It goes out to the customer source, the Microsoft customer source website. So when I log in to GP on my home page, I have this shortcut section. And so from here, I could just click on that link and it will open customer source for me automatically. You can set up a variety of shortcuts by right-clicking on the shortcut button, click Add. You can add GP windows, you can add smart lists, you can add external web pages or external Excel documents, Word documents, whatever you want, you can add to the shortcut list. So that's step one, is adding the shortcuts, but then once the shortcut's there, you notice in this case, I'm using keyboard shortcut F2. So you can use any keyboard shortcut F2 through F12, and then there's Shift F1 through 12, and then Control Shift. So there's a lot of different keyboard shortcuts. I'll stick with just the F2. And so regardless of where I am then within GP, I just click the F2 button and customer source opens for me. So for people that don't like to use their mouse, if they're heavy data entry, setting up some of those shortcuts and function keys may be a good way to, may save you guys some time. Yeah, exactly. So what Sean just commented was shortcuts are also a great place to save macros in GP. So if you guys are not aware, you can set up macros in GP. You know, it's similar to like an Excel macro where you can record a specific type of activity in GP and you can run the macro and it will go through that process for you. Sometimes we use that to import data that we can't get in through Integration Manager. There's, I think some people have a macro set up to run the AR aging routine. So you can set up macros for various things. Not to get too far off topic. The next thing I want to talk about is the Professional Services Tools Library, and specifically the Document Date Verify tool. So this is a free tool in GP. To use any of the professional services tools, you have to be logged into GP as SA, as the system administrator. But you notice there's a lot of good tools out here. The Document Date Verify tool, what that does is if I'm in, let's say, payables, entering a payable transaction, and I'll show you. I'll walk through an example. So I'm keying in an entry here, and I mistype in so I typed in back to 1901, for example. I don't have a fiscal period set up for this document. Now, without turning that tool on, I could click continue here and GP would allow me to continue. What then happens is if you need to go in and void that, it becomes a huge issue because that fiscal period's not set up and you start running into all sorts of errors. With that feature turned on, you notice if I tab off that field, I can't get off that field until I change the date. So enabling the doc date verify tool to be enabled frees me up from not having to worry about this type of issue. And we have run into it in the past where, somebody has keyed in either, many years in the future or many years in the past. And like I said, then it becomes an issue when you go to try to void that. The fiscal period's not set up. There's a lot we have to do or clean it up behind the scenes. So this prohibits that behavior from happening in the system. And it's a free tool and you own it, so why not? Why not use it? Anything that helps with good God, now I'm never getting out of here. That looks familiar too, doesn't it? All right. New user setup. So in the newer versions of GP, I think 2016 and 2018, you have the ability to copy information security settings from one user to another. So as you add new users to GP, a lot of times the new user is replacing somebody who's left. So you could just set up the new user and copy all of that security over to the new user. You don't have to, it's not a manual process. So I'm going to pick Mike Sinclair here. So once the new user is set up, named, you click on copy settings and you pick the person you want to copy. So there's two sections here. There's the security access, so I can copy all the security roles from one user to another. And then there's also the home page and the area page setups. So the nice thing about this is for new users in the system, you can customize the home page to have links to various reports and different windows that users need to access, and you can copy those settings from one user to another. So you don't have to manually set that up for each user individually. So you have both those options. Okay, next tip and trick is data entry, or date entry, I should say. So I'm back in my payables window. I'm going to the date field. So you notice right now, off the bat, it's defaulted to 4/12/2027, which is my date down here in the corner. I can, so if I'm in April processing April transactions, one of the things I can do is just type in 25 and hit tab, and you notice it fills in 4/25/2027. So that's one quick way to just enter dates. The other thing you can do is use your minus key to go down in dates and your plus key to increase the date. So again, speeding up data entry for people that, when they're keying everything in, they don't necessarily want to use the mouse and, pull up the calendar and select the date. So, you can use the plus or minus keys, type in just the day number, and it will increment to that date. Questions on any of that? Okay, then lastly, we are going to talk about processing payable checks for customers that have a credit balance. So a customer, let's say you send them an invoice, it's due upon receipt, they pay the invoice, but then there was a problem with one of the, with something, and so you issue them a credit, and they have a credit sitting on their account for a long time, and they call you and say, hey, can you just cut me a check for that? We don't have any upcoming orders, and we just, can you refund us that money? So here I am on the sales page. Under the transaction section, I'm going to scroll down here a little bit, and I'm going to go to this refund checks area. So you can refund checks. The customer overall has to have a balance. So if there are several invoices out there and there's also a credit, that customer will not show up in the refund check window unless their balance is a credit balance. You can do one of two things. So you notice first off, the option is select the check batch ID. So this is the actual payables check batch. So I'm just going to pick one. I have one out here set up. So you have one of two options for creating a refund. You can create one for a specific document, or I can say, I just want to issue credits for all the customers that have a credit balance. I'm going to do a specific customer. So I'm going to pick Kelly Consulting. I'm going to click the Insert button, and you notice here the window pulls up. Kelly Consulting has a credit of $731.94, so I'm going to issue them a check for that amount. So in this window, you can do one of two things. I can create a vendor, a corresponding vendor for this particular customer, or if there's already a vendor set up for this customer, I can actually look it up. I'm going to create one. So you notice I clicked on the Create button, and it pulled the customer information into my vendor maintenance window. And I have it set up behind the scenes to have the same vendor ID as the customer ID. So I'll say save here. And so now there's a link. So now I have the customer and the vendor set up. When I click process here, what's going to happen is GP is going to create a debit memo on the customer side to zero out their account balance. It's also going to create a payable on the payable side and then actually create the check. So it's going to create a check that's in a check batch that then somebody can go print and mail off. So I'll click process here. I'm going to print all of these reports to the screen so we can see what's going on. There's only about 20. You know, like 4 on the sales side, 5 on the payable side. You know how they have, okay, maybe not all of them. Maybe not all of them. All right. Forget that last one. So here on the sales side, it's creating a debit memo to zero out that customer balance. That's step 1. Here's the distribution breakdown. In between, when this document is feeding over from receivables over to payables, we have this cash suspense account set up, and that is used in the interim while this process is going on. You do. If you don't have a cash suspense account, you can set one up. If you have something similar, you can use an account that's already exists. And now we're on the payable side. And so on the payable side, you notice there is a miscellaneous type invoice called Refund. And so here it is. And then you notice the cash suspense side is debited or relieved because now it's in the payable. So at the end of this process, this 1190 account has zero balance. Nothing stays in there. And then here it is, the check printing screen. So the one caveat with this is you notice that it does create the payable check during the process. So sometimes we have to talk about security and you know, who should have access to this and who should be printing this stuff off, because maybe you don't want the person, you know, the receivables person printing payable checks. But so that's a consideration for this to happen. But it's a pretty quick process, right? Versus manually adjusting, you know, the customer side and then going over and creating the payable. It does all of that for you. Yes, ma'am. So you can, oh, sorry, I need to read the question back. So the question is, can you add this refund check to an already existing payables batch? And my answer is going to be on that yes, because I look up here, as long as the person that's running, obviously the person that's going to run this has to have access to the payable side. But you notice I could pick one of these already. It would just add it to that batch. So the second question is, what happens if you need to reprint a refund check? You should just be able to void the payable. It shouldn't go back and at that time, it's not going to go back and update the customer side, but you should be able to void it and reprocess and print a new check if you needed to.